Well, first of all, I just want to say what an honor it is for me to exhibit with James Burke and Sam Corso and Brian Kelly. It's especially an honor for me to share a gallery space with Jim Burke because he was a professor of mine when I was a young graduate student at LSU studying printmaking. He was one of my two professors. So now all these years later, I won't say how many years later, Jim, but all these years later now, here we are sharing the same gallery space. So it's a real honor for me. A couple of things that might be helpful to know when looking at my artwork. One is that for me, I regard one of the roles of art as having the ability to kind of shed some light or reveal kind of hidden truths about the nature of reality. You know, so for me, the process, the creative process, and even viewing art as a thing has the potential to kind of reveal truths about the world. And so that's one of the roles that I assign art. That's what it is for me when I'm making work. That's one thing. The other thing is a little bit of history. After I graduated from LSU, I guess a couple of years, I stayed a couple of years after I graduated in 1990 from LSU here in Baton Rouge. I moved away to Northern Ireland, and I was there for about 13 years before I came back in 2005. And one of the things the best art, I think, that I saw in Northern Ireland was by Northern Irish artists that dealt with their heritage. The Irish are very connected with their history and their politics and their society. And when artists make art about that, I think it can be really, really powerful. And it was very inspirational for me to see that kind of art when I was there. And I thought, well, I can't really make art about the heritage of Northern Ireland, you know, and still be honest about that. But I couldn't make art about my own heritage. And suddenly I became very interested in American history. I started reading about American history. Whenever I came home to visit my mom in West Texas, where I grew up, she would give me photographs, family photographs, and I was seeing photographs from the Civil War, and all these things were kind of coming together. My impulse, when my mom would give me family photographs, I would get them back home again and I would want to paint or draw on them. So rather than destroy the actual photographs, you know, I would scan them and digitally reproduce them and print them on archival paper in some form that I could draw and paint on. Early on, it was pretty much the unaltered photograph, and I would make a completely different image on top of that kind of background, as kind of background information. And then later on, I began to sort of dismantle things, taking things apart, creating kind of digital collages, and then painting or drawing or printing on top of that. So that's sort of how these images came about. This was it's a long process, but this is sort of where it's at this point. Another thing, when I was in Northern Ireland, very often in the pubs and the restaurants, and I don't know why this is, but very often you'll see these comparative charts. It'll be like bottlenose dolphins or dolphins of the North Atlantic, and they're all there together and you can see them and compare them, or it'll be the plants, mountainous plants of the British Isles or something like that. And they're very attractive kinds of things aesthetically. And they also purport to, you know, shed some kind of understanding about those things that they're comparing. So, I mean, you know, it's one thing to think about a dolphin on its own, and then when you see two together, well, you can make comparisons and draw conclusions. So they're intended to, you know, make you draw some conclusion about the things that they're comparing. So with that in mind, then, I'll just talk a little bit about some of these. I suppose, like Jim, you know, I want there to be enough of a visual pull from across the room to make you want to go and inspect a piece more closely. And then when you're there, I want you really to see through those layers of information so that in a way you can make those comparisons from one object to the next. I think you know, you can have objects side by side as a comparative thing, and you can have layers. As a printmaker, especially as a lithographer, you know, you build an image by individual colors stacking up on each other. So that, you know, you make the yellow as a separate drawing and print that, and then you make the red plate as a separate drawing and print that, and all the colors are made and printed separately, and they all stack up to form a kind of cohesive image. And when I started making these mixed media works, I kind of wanted to approach them in the same way, of this layering of information. But it occurred to me that the layers don't necessarily have to be aligned or connected, visually or conceptually. And that, you know, the conceptual power of a piece can go into the work as well as, you know, from side to side. So, so there's a lot of information there in layers, and that's what I want the viewer to discover when they get a little bit closer to a piece. I don't know if I want to talk about any one of these specifically. The waiting room is just how I regard being on planet Earth. So I kind of think of it as a waiting room. We're all sitting around waiting for something, something to happen. And in this case, I've got one chair that in my mind I liken to the physical, which is this, and it's got a little leaf beside it, and then the spiritual, and it's got like a little pyramid there, so just little visual clues about those things. This was the first waiting room. I kind of like contradictions, and I know people, from talking to people, that they have some difficulty discerning the background image in this piece, and it's a photograph of a merry-go-round. That's what this background, you can see sort of the horse here, the little ears and the poles here. So it's a spinning merry-go-round. And I've just drawn the chairs on top of that. So it's both the still and the moving simultaneously. And a little clue about that is look at the spinning planet around the sun there, or maybe an atom. This one is a star chart in the background. It's one of those really old star charts that I found really visually attractive, and I wanted to do something with it. And so I thought it would be interesting to look both up at the stars and down at this neighborhood at the same time, have those occupy the same space. And that's really the crux of this piece. So it's just called The Neighborhood. The neighborhood in terms of our place in the solar system and this physical neighborhood. The one on the end there is just a response to the oil spill. When that happened, I wanted to, you know, do some piece about that. And, you know, for me, the problem wasn't as much our insatiable appetite for oil and gasoline that was the problem as much as the suppliers of that. And so, you know, for my part in the tragedy, I'm the driver. You know, when I buy that gasoline, so I kind of fuel that crazy consumption of oil. So that is my car from high school. It's a '68 Plymouth Fury. And I was fond of that car. I really liked that car. I wish I still had it. But also there is I borrowed a print. It's funny, something Jim said about artists borrowing things. I think now artists don't borrow, they appropriate imagery. And so we're off the hook. We're not thieves anymore, we're appropriators. So I appropriated one of James Audubon's marsh wren images. And I wanted to have this tragedy on top of Audubon. And I turned Audubon on its side because it threw up these birds in a kind of distressful way, these little marsh wrens. So, and then I've got the oil floating on this sea of water. So, you know, there are many things happening in these layers. These are just things from where I grew up in West Texas. You know, West Texas is very flat and dry, semi-arid place with lots of cactus and rattlesnakes and stickers and, you know, sharp things to get hurt on. So we were always told when we went out, you know, watch out for rattlesnakes now if we were in the country, you know, right around Lubbock where I grew up. So, and there were always cactus and things. So, you know, just thinking about my heritage and my family history and my personal history and all of my experiences, all of those things kind of tend to come together in a haphazard way. And they're all really, I suppose, meant to shed some kind of light on my identity, I suppose, now, in the way that I could see the artists in Northern Ireland using their exploration of their heritage, giving some kind of information to them about who they are now. And that was really the role that I want these to do for me. I suppose we should talk about this piece, this troublesome piece over here. It's troublesome because lately it's been blowing off the wall. People coming in through the door, but that's all right. I'm going to fix that before I leave. This piece came about slowly, partly because as a response to the photographs that my mother was giving me when I would come home for visits from Ireland and go away and then mutilate those with drawings and paintings or prints on top of them. And partly because when my grandmother died, you know, some of the things I got from her house were these little cardboard cigar boxes full of photographs and little things that my grandmother tucked away in there for only, I guess only she knows why she did that, you know. For instance, and this is one of the things that my grandmother put in one of these little cigar boxes, and I'll just reveal what's inside there. It's a double pecan. I guess she just thought of it as a curiosity, you know, and she wanted to save it. And she's got it really tucked away in a nice little, you know, there's a little Kleenex in there, so it's nice and safe, secure. You know, it's very important. And at the same time, you know, I was curious. One of the things I'm curious about, you know, I really enjoy mysteries, and I'm curious about the mystery of UFOs. I did see a UFO when I was in Northern Ireland. It was a very, very odd sort of thing. And it was at nighttime, and it was just two little, it just looked like the openings of a straw floating over me with bright light coming out of each end, and it was completely quiet, just hovering maybe 50 feet over me. It was a really, really odd experience, and so I've been very, very curious about them. But even if I had never seen one, I was curious about them. I'm curious about why people see them and what they are and what they mean. I don't know. I don't have the answers.